11,000 feet, 22 days, one shattered ankle. The mountain had me in its frozen grip, and it wasn't planning on letting go. Every sunrise was a shock, every sunset a terror. But what nobody knew, what even I barely understood until later, was that my fight for life didn't start with the fall. It started weeks earlier, with $20 and an old man who'd forgotten his wallet. A moment that cost me my job, and then, in the craziest damn twist, helped give me back my life. My name is Tiffany Slaton. Back then, summer of 21, I was 27, still carrying that Georgia sunshine in my pocket, and the kind of easy, almost breezy confidence that comes from a life mostly lived on solid, predictable ground. A good job, friends, family who loved me. The mountains, though, the California Sierras, they were a different beast altogether. A siren song of granite spires scraping impossibly blue skies, of pine forests breathing out air so clean it felt like a baptism, promising solitude, a clean slate from the city's relentless hum. A challenge that whispered my name. I'd answered that call before, on shorter, more forgiving trails. Always came back feeling a little stronger, a little clearer in the head, like the mountain had scrubbed away the noise and left only the essential. This time, the mountain decided to keep a piece of me. Or maybe, just maybe, it gave me a piece I never knew I was missing, a piece forged in ice and hunger, and the deafening silence of utter isolation. It was supposed to be a day hike. That's the kicker, isn't it? Just a day, the 16th of August, Mammoth Lakes. Even the name sounds grand, promising adventure. And it delivered, in its own twisted way. The plan was to hike up towards Humphrey's Basin, an off-trail route I'd researched, plotted on my map. Stunning country. The kind of primal beauty that makes you forget your deadlines, your anxieties, forget everything but the rhythmic crunch of your boots on the trail, the burn in your thighs, and the vast, indifferent, achingly beautiful sky above. I had my pack, layers for the altitude, high-energy bars that tasted like sweetened cardboard but did the job, 2 liters of water, my trusty, or so I thought, map and compass, my phone. The usual kit for a seasoned day tripper. I wasn't a novice, knew my way around a switchback, but I wasn't exactly a grizzled mountaineer who could navigate by the stars with one eye closed. The mountains, I've learned, have a particularly harsh way of humbling you, no matter how prepared you think you are. That morning, the air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, a perfume more intoxicating than anything you could buy in a bottle. I felt good, strong, my legs eating up the initial incline. The higher I climbed, the thinner the air became, each breath a little more deliberate, a little more precious. But the views, God, the views. They unfolded like a divine tapestry, jagged peaks clawing at a sky so fiercely blue it almost hurt your eyes, valleys unfurling below like wrinkled emerald carpets, dotted with impossibly clear alpine lakes. I was on top of the world, literally and figuratively, a tiny speck of human ambition against a backdrop of geological time. I took what I thought was a promising side trail, one that looked less traveled on my map, whispering of an even more spectacular, uncrowded vista. That, right there, was my first mistake. Or perhaps, just the first irrevocable step on the path I was apparently destined, or doomed, to walk. The fog. It rolled in like an unwelcome, uninvited guest. Silent and impossibly swift. 1 minute, I could see the next ridgeline, the curve of the valley below, the sun a warm promise on my skin. The next, I was wrapped in a disorienting, featureless white blanket, so thick I couldn't see more than 10 feet in any direction. The trail markers, those little painted blazes on rocks, those small cairns, those comforting reassurances of civilization, vanished as if they'd never existed. Panic, cold and sharp as a shard of ice, pricked at the back of my neck, then spread, a creeping chill. "It's okay, Tiff," I told myself, my voice sounding ridiculously small and reedy against the sudden, heavy, muffling silence of the fog. "You've been in fog before. Just retrace your steps. Common sense. Don't freak out." But common sense, that reliable friend in the everyday, has a funny way of packing its bags and deserting you when you're truly disoriented. When every tree starts to look like every other tree, when every rock formation mocks your desperate attempts at navigation. I pulled out my map, smoothed its creases, but in the thick, swirling mist, it felt like a child's abstract drawing, a collection of meaningless squiggles and lines. My compass needle spun, then settled, but pointing towards what? Towards more fog? Hours crawled by, each one a fresh torment of uncertainty. The initial prickle of panic had grown into a hard, cold knot of dread in my stomach, a physical ache. I was lost. Not just not sure where the trail is, lost. I was lost. Truly, deeply, terrifyingly lost. High in the eastern Sierras, alone. And then, as if to punctuate my dawning horror, the mountain decided to add insult to injury. Or maybe, more accurately, injury to my already growing list of injuries to come. I was scrambling over a slick, moss-covered boulder, trying to get a better vantage point as the fog momentarily thinned, hoping to see anything familiar. My boot, usually so reliable, slipped on the treacherous surface. There was a sound, a sickening, dry crunch that seemed to echo in the sudden stillness, followed by a white-hot, electrifying lance of pain shooting up my leg, so intense it stole my breath and brought tears to my eyes. I crumpled to the ground, a strangled cry escaping my lips, lost in the indifferent mist. My ankle, twisted, sprained, broken. I didn't know which, didn't want to know. But the pain was a screaming, undeniable, irrefutable testament to the fact that I was now not only profoundly lost, but also seriously, debilitatingly crippled. The first night was a descent into a private hell. The fog clung to everything, a cold, damp shroud. As soon as the unseen sun dipped below the equally unseen horizon, the temperature plummeted with a vicious speed I hadn't anticipated. I found myself huddled at the base of a large, gnarled pine, its branches offering scant protection from the wind that had picked up, moaning through the trees like a lost soul. I pulled my jacket tighter, every pocket, every zipper a small defense against the encroaching cold. My teeth began to chatter, a frantic, uncontrollable rhythm against the silence. The pain in my ankle throbbed with a malevolent, insistent pulse, a counterpoint to my racing heart. Every rustle in the undergrowth, every snap of a distant twig, sounded like a predator stalking me in the darkness, a bear, a mountain lion. My city-bred imagination ran wild, conjuring unseen eyes watching me from the shadows. Sleep was an impossible dream. The cold seeped into my bones, a relentless, insidious enemy, making my muscles ache and my joints stiffen. I rationed my remaining water, taking tiny, precious sips. I forced down a few bites of a protein bar, the cloying sweetness almost unbearable in my dry, terrified mouth. Hope, that bright flame I'd carried so easily just hours before, had dwindled to a distant, flickering candle, one that felt like it could be snuffed out by the next gust of wind, by the vast, indifferent, starless darkness that pressed in on me from all sides. Day 2 dawned gray and unforgiving. The fog had lifted, but what it revealed was no comfort. It was a landscape that was simultaneously breathtakingly beautiful and terrifyingly, overwhelmingly immense. Jagged granite peaks, indifferent to my plight, soared into the sky. Deep, forested valleys unfurled in every direction, offering no obvious path, no sign of human passage. I was a speck, a tiny, insignificant, and now injured intruder in a world that didn't know I existed, and certainly didn't care. My ankle was a swollen, grotesque, purple-black monstrosity. Even the slightest pressure sent daggers of pain shooting up my leg. I knew I couldn't stay put. That was a death sentence. I had to move, had to find water, had to try and get back to some semblance of a trail, any trail. But where? In which direction did salvation, or at least a slightly less agonizing demise, lie? The compass, the map, they still felt like alien artifacts, offering no easy answers in this three-dimensional, unforgiving wilderness. I fashioned a crude crutch from a fallen branch, testing its strength, knowing it would be my unwilling partner in this agonizing journey. The first few days were a frantic, pain-filled, stumbling scramble. I learned to read the land in a way I never had from books or online guides, the subtle direction moss grew on the north side of trees, the way water might pool in a rocky depression after a rare, fleeting rain shower, the faintest hint of an animal track that might, just might, lead to a life-giving stream. Water became my singular obsession. Dehydration, I knew, was a swift and merciless killer at this altitude. After what felt like an eternity of painful searching, I found it, a small, trickling spring, the water emerging from a crack in a rock face, icy and tasting of raw minerals and earth. But it was the most beautiful, most precious thing I had ever encountered. I filled my bottle, drank until my parched stomach ached in protest, then filled it again, hoarding it like treasure. Food was another, more insidious, enemy. My carefully rationed protein bars dwindled with alarming speed. I tried to identify edible plants from a half-remembered survival guide I'd once skimmed through, but the fear of accidentally poisoning myself, of adding another layer of agony to my already considerable suffering, kept me incredibly cautious. Hunger became a constant companion, a dull, persistent ache that slowly sharpened into a gnawing, relentless emptiness that hollowed me out from the inside. My body, so used to its 3 square meals a day, its lattes and its salads, started to protest loudly, then began the grim, silent process of cannibalizing itself for fuel. I was a city girl, used to grocery stores and takeout menus. The idea of foraging for survival had always been an abstract concept, something you read about. Now, it was my terrifying reality. I remember, with a clarity that still makes me shudder, finding a patch of ants. Desperation is a powerful motivator. I ate them. They tasted earthy, a little bit sour. Not exactly gourmet, but at that point, anything that wasn't rock or pine needle felt like a feast. Shelter each night was a desperate, improvised affair. An overhang of rock that offered minimal protection from the wind. A dense thicket of trees that felt slightly less exposed. A shallow depression in the ground, lined with pine needles that did little to cushion the cold, hard earth. I learned to build a rudimentary windbreak from fallen branches and whatever scraps of vegetation I could find. The nights were the true test. The cold at 11,000 feet wasn't just uncomfortable, it was a physical entity, a malevolent presence that seemed to suck the warmth, the very life force, out of you. I'd shiver uncontrollably for hours, my muscles spasming, dreaming of roaring fires, thick blankets, and warm beds, only to wake with a jolt to the harsh, brutal reality of frozen ground beneath me, and a sky full of cold, distant, utterly indifferent stars. I felt so small, so fragile, so utterly alone. To combat the crushing silence and the encroaching despair, I talked to myself. A lot, sometimes out loud, my voice hoarse and cracking in the thin air. Sometimes just a running commentary in my head. Pep talks, like a deranged motivational speaker lost in the wilderness. You can do this, Tiff. One more step. Just one more. Prayers to a God I wasn't sure I still believed in, but who I desperately hoped was listening. Curses, hurled with what little energy I had left, at the unyielding mountain, at my own stupidity for getting into this mess. I sang off-key songs from my childhood, fragments of pop tunes, anything to break the oppressive, deafening silence, anything to remind myself that I was still human, still Tiffany, not just some lost, wounded animal slowly succumbing to the elements. Time warped, stretched, and compressed in a bewildering dance. Was it day 5, day 7, day 10? The sun rose, arced slowly and inexorably across the vast expanse of the sky, and then, with agonizing slowness, dipped below the western peaks, plunging me back into the freezing darkness. That was my only clock, my only calendar. My world, once so full of plans and appointments and social engagements, shrank to the immediate, the primal. Find water, find shelter, endure the relentless pain in my ankle, try, with every fiber of my being, not to lose my goddamn mind. The civilized veneer I'd worn for 27 years was being stripped away, layer by painful layer, revealing something raw and elemental underneath. My ankle. God, my ankle. It became the epicenter of my suffering, a malevolent dictator ruling my every waking moment and haunting my fitful, pain-laced sleep. It throbbed with a life of its own, a deep, persistent ache that no amount of repositioning could alleviate. It burned as if a branding iron were pressed against the bone. And with every misstep, every awkward lurch as I tried to navigate the treacherous, uneven ground, it sent shooting, electrifying pains up my leg, sometimes so intense they'd make me cry out, a raw, animalistic sound that startled even myself. I rewrapped it countless times with strips torn from my spare t-shirt, the fabric quickly becoming soiled and stiff. The makeshift bindings offered little real support, more a psychological comfort, a small act of doing something in a situation where I felt so utterly powerless. Some days, the pain was so overwhelming, so all-consuming, that I could barely move. I'd just lie there, curled up in my inadequate shelter, staring up at the canopy of pine branches, tears of frustration, pain, and abject despair leaking silently from the corners of my eyes, freezing on my cheeks. Those were the days when the temptation to simply give up, to let the mountain claim me, was at its strongest. What was the point of this agonizing charade? Who would even find me out here, in this vast, uncaring wilderness? Then came the storm. It wasn't a gentle mountain shower. It hit without warning, a sudden, violent, furious deluge of ice-cold rain and stinging sleet, driven by a wind that howled like a banshee, tearing through the trees, ripping at my clothes. My makeshift shelter, a pathetic lean-to against a rock face, was instantly useless. I was soaked to the bone in minutes, the chilling water seeping through every layer, stealing what little body heat I had left. The cold became more intense, more brutal than anything I had experienced before. I remember huddling under a large, fallen log, the rough bark digging into my back, water dripping relentlessly down my neck, into my eyes, my mouth. I shivered so hard, so uncontrollably, that I thought my bones would break, my teeth chattering like castanets in a macabre dance. That night, I truly came close to letting go. The thought of just stopping, of ceasing the struggle, of letting the cold embrace me and drift into a final, numb sleep, was a seductive, insidious whisper in the howling, raging wind. What was the point of enduring more of this? Who would even mourn a foolish girl who'd gotten herself lost and died alone on a mountain? But then, just as the darkness threatened to consume me entirely, something would shift. A flicker. A memory would surface, unbidden. My mom's laugh, warm and infectious, echoing from a sunnier, safer time. The image of my little brother, Daniel, his face bright with excitement as he showed me his latest Lego creation. The stubborn, inexplicable, almost infuriating refusal of the human spirit to be extinguished. A tiny, defiant spark would flicker back to life in the deepest recesses of my soul. "Not yet, you bastard mountain," I'd whisper, my voice a hoarse, broken croak against the storm's fury. "You haven't beaten me yet. You don't get to win that easily." The isolation started to play tricks on my mind. I started seeing things, or maybe hearing them, a snatch of music, a familiar melody, drifting on the wind, only to vanish when I strained to listen. A familiar voice, my mother's, my best friend's, calling my name, always just out of sight, just beyond the next rise. The rational part of my brain, the part that still clung to sanity, knew it wasn't real, that it was the product of starvation, exhaustion, and profound loneliness. But the desperate, frayed, lonely part of me, the part that craved any human connection, clung to these phantoms, these auditory hallucinations, like a drowning woman clutching at a piece of driftwood. My reflection in a rare, still puddle looked like a stranger. Gaunt, hollow-eyed, my skin stretched tight over my cheekbones, caked in dirt and grime, my hair a matted, tangled mess. Who was this wild, desperate creature staring back at me? Was this all that was left of Tiffany Slaton, the girl who loved spreadsheets and weekend brunches? I remember one morning, waking up to a silence so profound, so absolute, it was almost deafening. The world outside my meager shelter was covered in a fresh, pristine blanket of early autumn snow. It was achingly beautiful, every branch, every rock dusted in glittering white, and utterly, completely terrifying. The snow had erased any tracks I might have been following, any faint signs I might have left for potential rescuers. I felt a despair so deep, so complete, it was almost peaceful, a strange, cold serenity. Maybe this was it. Maybe I was meant to become part of this wild, unforgiving, beautiful landscape, another forgotten soul swallowed by the Sierras. But as the sun climbed higher, its weak rays beginning to melt the snow into 1,000 glittering, transient diamonds, I saw it. a flash of color. Red. A small, almost insignificant splash of artificial red against the natural palette of green, brown, and white. A discarded piece of flagging tape, tattered and faded, tied to a low-hanging branch. A trail marker. My heart, which I thought had almost ceased to beat with any real vigor, leaped with a sudden, shocking violence that almost knocked me over. It wasn't a main trail, probably an old, disused game trail or a forgotten surveyor's path, but it was something, a sign, a tangible sign that other humans had been here, had passed this way. It was a whisper of hope in the deafening silence of my despair. That day, I pushed myself harder than I ever thought humanly possible. Adrenaline, or maybe just sheer, desperate, unadulterated hope, coursed through my veins, temporarily numbing the relentless pain in my ankle. I followed those sparse, faded markers, praying they weren't leading me in circles, praying they led somewhere, anywhere, other than deeper into this frozen hell. Each red scrap of plastic was a beacon, a tiny promise in a vast wilderness of broken ones. And then, I heard it, faint at first, almost indistinguishable from the rustling of the wind in the pines, a rhythmic, mechanical whirring, a helicopter. My throat was raw, my voice a pathetic croak, but I screamed until my lungs burned. I waved my arms, a tattered piece of my brightly colored bandana clutched in my trembling hand, waving it like a madwoman. It passed overhead, too high, too distant, a silver bird against the indifferent blue. My shoulders slumped, my knees buckled. Another false hope, another cruel trick of the mountain. The tears, hot and bitter, started to flow again. But then, miraculously, impossibly, it circled back, lower this time, and then lower still, the thumping of its rotors a deafening, beautiful symphony. I could see the figures inside, looking down, and then, one of them pointed. They'd seen me. I don't remember much of what happened immediately after that. It's a fragmented, dreamlike sequence, a winch lowering a rescuer, strong hands, impossibly strong, pulling me up, securing me. The overwhelming, deafening roar of the rotors as we lifted off the ground, away from the rocks and trees that had been my prison for 3 eternal weeks. The blessed, almost forgotten, overwhelming sensation of warmth inside the cabin of the helicopter. A medic speaking to me, his voice calm and reassuring, but his eyes, when I could focus on them, full of a kind of odd, professional concern. I think I babbled incoherently. I think I cried, not just cried, but sobbed, great, heaving, animalistic sobs that tore through me. I know I kept saying thank you, over and over and over, like a broken record, the words inadequate, a pitiful offering for the gift of life I'd just been handed back. Waking up in a hospital bed was a surreal, almost out-of-body experience. The crisp, starched white sheets, a stark contrast to the cold, damp earth I'd grown accustomed to. The steady, rhythmic beep of a heart monitor, a comforting sound after weeks of only wind and my own ragged breathing. The blessed, almost forgotten sensation of being clean, of being truly warm, of not being in constant, agonizing, grinding pain. My mom was there, her face a roadmap of worry lines etched deeper by weeks of unimaginable fear, but now softened by an ocean of relief. Her hand, when it clasped mine, was an anchor. My little brother, Daniel, bless his 10-year-old heart, was trying to be brave, to be the man of the house, but his eyes were red-rimmed and he clung to my other hand like he'd never let go. They told me the details, filled in the blanks of my fractured memory. It had been 22 days, 3 weeks. I'd lost a dangerous amount of weight, nearly 30 pounds, they said. I was severely dehydrated, malnourished, suffering from exposure, and the early stages of hypothermia. My ankle was badly fractured, requiring surgery. But I was alive. That was the word that kept echoing in the sterile, quiet room. Alive. The doctors, the nurses, they used words like miraculous, incredible resilience, unbelievable will to live. I didn't feel like a hero, not then. I felt like someone who had made a series of stupid, arrogant mistakes and had, by some combination of sheer luck, divine intervention, and a stubborn, almost animalistic refusal to die, managed to crawl out of a nightmare. I felt empty, hollowed out, and then, slowly, gradually, overwhelmingly, full. Full of a gratitude so profound, so immense, it ached in my chest almost as much as my recovering body. The story, apparently, got out. Spread like wildfire. Georgia woman survives 3 weeks alone, injured, in California mountains at 11,000 feet. It sounded like a movie tagline. Something dramatic and sensationalized. Not my life, not those 22 days of raw, unvarnished hell. People I'd never met, from all over the country, all over the world, sent messages, called me a hero, an inspiration. I didn't feel like a hero. When you're reduced to eating ants and huddling under a log praying for morning, heroism is the furthest thing from your mind. Survival is, just, survival. The physical recovery was long, and often frustrating. Learning to walk on my mended ankle, first with crutches, then with a cane, then, finally, tentatively, on my own 2 feet again. Rebuilding the muscle I'd lost, forcing down food when my stomach still recoiled from the memory of starvation. But the mental recovery, that's an ongoing journey, a trail with no clear end. The mountain changed me, in ways I'm still discovering. It stripped away the non-essentials, the vanities, the petty anxieties that used to consume so much of my energy. It showed me the raw, brutal, yet strangely beautiful core of existence. It taught me that a single sip of clean water can be a religious experience, that the warmth of the sun on your skin is a profound gift, that the sound of another human voice can be the sweetest, most reassuring music in the universe. People ask me, inevitably, if I'll ever hike alone in the high country again. For a long time, the answer was a resounding, unequivocal hell no. The fear, the memory of that cold, gnawing terror, was too fresh, too potent. But the call of the wild, that siren song of granite and pine, it's still there, a low, persistent hum beneath the surface of my new, more cautious, more appreciative life. I don't know if I'll ever answer it in the same way again. But now, I understand its price. I understand the profound, unwavering respect it demands. You don't conquer a mountain. If you're lucky, it allows you to pass. What I do know, with a certainty that settles deep in my bones, is this: that young woman, Tiffany Slaton, who confidently, almost arrogantly, strode up that trail on the 16th of August, map in hand, so sure of her path, so sure of her abilities. She died up there on that mountain. She was stripped away by the hunger, by the cold, by the fear, by the crushing loneliness. But the woman who came down, the one who learned to drink from muddy puddles and find meager shelter in the lee of a rock, the one who talked to the indifferent stars and stubbornly refused to let the darkness win, she's stronger, in ways I'm still trying to comprehend, than I ever imagined I could be. And that little act of kindness at the Carter gas station, weeks before my ill-fated hike, covering that $20 for Mr. Thomas Grant, that sweet old man who'd forgotten his wallet, who looked so lost and embarrassed, that's the part that still feels like a strange, beautiful, almost unbelievable loop in the fabric of fate. Troy, my manager then, had been furious. "Are you actually that stupid?" he'd sneered, his face red. He'd fired me on the spot, called me naive, a liability. Losing that job had felt like a blow then, another piece of bad luck. But Mr. Thomas Grant, it turned out, was the father of Oliver Grant, the owner of the entire Carter gas chain. When Oliver heard the full story, how his father, struggling with early dementia, had been treated with such dignity by a young gas station attendant, how that same attendant had covered his bill from her own nearly empty purse, and how she'd then been summarily fired for it, he was, to put it mildly, not pleased with Troy. So, a few days after I was rescued, still weak but on the mend, I got a call. It was Oliver Grant himself. He didn't just offer me my old job back. He said his father hadn't stopped talking about the kind young woman at the gas station. He said that act, that small, unthinking gesture of compassion, spoke volumes. He offered me a new role, a customer care coordinator position at his regional office. A real office, with a desk, and benefits, and a starting salary that made my mom cry with relief, and my eyes water for a whole different reason. He even sent me a beautiful, custom-engraved pen. On the side it read, "To Lizzie for choosing humanity." He'd gotten my name slightly wrong from his father, but the sentiment was overwhelming. It wasn't charity, he'd insisted. He called it an acknowledgement. He said what I did at that station, making a judgment call based on compassion and empathy, even when no one important was watching, even when it potentially cost me, that was the kind of character, the kind of thinking, he wanted at the heart of his company. He said you can teach skills, but you can't teach integrity, and I'd already proven I had it in spades. So now, my mornings begin with the smell of decent coffee and the quiet hum of an office, not the reek of diesel and the fumbling for pump keys in the freezing cold. My fingers, once calloused from manual labor, now fly over spreadsheets and client responses. I wear a professional name badge, Tiffany Slaton, customer care coordinator, and later, leadership intern, regional development, and when I speak in meetings, people actually listen. Not because I'm loud, but because they seem to value what I have to say. It's a world away from the buzzing, beeping, often thankless chaos of the gas station. Sometimes, I still wake up in the middle of the night, the phantom chill of the mountain clinging to my skin, the oppressive silence of the high-altitude wilderness ringing in my ears. Troy's bitter, accusatory phone call after he inevitably lost his job, blaming me for his downfall, still echoes sometimes, a sour, discordant note in the otherwise sweeter symphony of my current life. But then I look at the pen Oliver Grant gave me, a solid, reassuring weight in my hand. I think about his father, Thomas, and the genuine, unadulterated warmth in his eyes when he'd come back to the station that day to thank me, long before my ill-fated hike, long before any of this corporate whirlwind. Life is irrevocably different. I carry the mountain with me, always. Not as a crushing burden, though the memories can still be heavy, but as a stark, indelible reminder. A reminder that even in the deepest, coldest, most terrifying darkness, when you think you have nothing left, there's a strength you don't know you possess until you're forced to dig down and find it. A reminder that kindness, true, uncalculated kindness, isn't weakness. It's a profound form of wisdom. It resonates. It echoes. Through people, through unexpected connections, sometimes through entire systems, and yes, even through generations. And sometimes, it only takes a seemingly insignificant $20 bill, or a moment of shared, unpretentious humanity, to remind the world, and more importantly, to remind yourself, of what really, truly matters. I'd found a place, an opportunity, where my innate values weren't a liability to be hidden or suppressed, but were recognized as my greatest, most valuable strength. I wasn't just surviving anymore, not in any sense of the word. I was building something. And maybe, just maybe, after all the wandering, all the trials, I finally, truly, belong. Yeah, that's my story. Not the one I would have chosen, not the one I would have written for myself, but the one the mountain, and perhaps a little bit of fate, wrote for me. And I'm still here, breathing this air, telling this tale. That, I guess, when you strip everything else away, is the most next fucking level part of it all.